Something just happened in Cleveland that has the entire football world buzzing, and it's not another front office leak or draft rumor. Browns wide receiver Malachi Corley went on record and revealed details about his upcoming training sessions with Shedeur Sanders, and the internet absolutely exploded. But here's the thing. What Corley said wasn't just about throwing a football around. It was a statement. A declaration that the locker room is already moving forward with Shedeur as their guy, regardless of what the outside noise keeps suggesting. And speaking of noise, the Malik Willis rumors that dominated headlines for weeks just got completely dismantled by insiders who finally called it what it always was: smoke and mirrors. But that's still not the strangest part of this story. Because while all of this was happening, reports surfaced that the Cleveland Browns are actually petitioning the NFL to change the rules so they can trade draft picks 5 years into the future. Yeah, you read that right. 5 years. The implications of that request are staggering, and the reaction from analysts has been brutal. This is everything you need to know about what's really happening in Cleveland right now. Let's start with the moment that set the football internet on fire. Malachi Corley, the Cleveland Browns wide receiver who quietly put together a solid rookie campaign last season, sat down for an interview and casually dropped a bombshell that nobody was expecting. He announced that he's linking up with Shedeur Sanders in Cleveland over the coming weeks to get some throwing sessions in together. And just like that, the entire narrative around Cleveland's quarterback situation shifted in a way that no press release or official statement could have accomplished. Think about the significance of what Corley revealed. This isn't a mandatory team activity. This isn't something the coaching staff ordered the players to do. This is a wide receiver on his own time, during his own offseason, choosing to fly to Cleveland and work with the quarterback that the organization is building around. That decision speaks louder than any statement from the front office ever could. It tells you that inside that locker room, the players have already made up their minds about who their leader is going to be. Corley was relaxed and genuine when he talked about it. He mentioned that the session isn't happening immediately, but rather in a couple of weeks, and that he hopes to get multiple throwing sessions in throughout the offseason. The casual nature of how he discussed it made it clear that this isn't some publicity stunt or orchestrated media moment. This is just a professional football player doing what professional football players do when they believe in their quarterback. They put in the extra work. They build chemistry before training camp. They make sure that when the season starts, the timing and the trust are already there. For those who didn't follow Malachi Corley's rookie season closely, let's break down why his endorsement matters. This wasn't a player who got buried on the depth chart and never saw the field. Corley was actually productive in his role, particularly on underneath routes and reverses where his athleticism and burst could be maximized. He showed flashes of the kind of playmaking ability that made him a coveted prospect coming out of college, and he did it in an offense that was dysfunctional at best and completely broken at worst. When a young receiver who performed well in a bad situation voluntarily commits his offseason to building a connection with the incoming quarterback, that tells you something important about the culture that's forming in Cleveland. It tells you that the players aren't buying into the negativity. They aren't sitting around wondering if maybe they should wait and see what happens with the Malik Willis rumors or any of the other alternatives that keep getting floated by people outside the building. They're moving forward. They're investing their time and energy into making Shedeur Sanders successful, and that kind of buy-in is priceless. The reaction online was immediate and intense. Browns fans who have been waiting for any sign of positivity latched onto Corley's comments like a lifeline. After months of speculation, rumor mongering, and endless debate about whether Cleveland should even draft Shedeur at all, here was concrete evidence that the people who actually have to play alongside him are excited about the opportunity. That matters. That matters more than any mock draft or hot take from a talking head who has never stepped inside that locker room. But the significance extends beyond just the feel-good narrative. From a pure football perspective, the kind of work that Corley and Shedeur are planning to put in together is exactly what separates good offenses from great ones. The timing between a quarterback and his receivers isn't something that just magically appears when training camp opens. It's built through countless repetitions, through working on specific routes and specific throws until the connection becomes instinctive. When a quarterback drops back and looks at a receiver running a dig route, he needs to know exactly when that receiver is going to break. He needs to trust that the ball is going to arrive at the right spot at the right time. That trust doesn't come from playbooks or film study. It comes from putting in the work together. Corley clearly understands this. His comments about wanting to throw with Shedeur multiple times throughout the offseason show a level of commitment and professionalism that bodes well for Cleveland's future. This is a young receiver who isn't just waiting for the season to start. He's actively trying to put himself and his quarterback in the best possible position to succeed. And if Corley is doing this, you can bet that other receivers on the roster are thinking the same way. Chemistry is contagious. When one player commits to the extra work, others follow. Before you know it, you have an entire receiving corps that has spent the offseason building connections with their new signal caller. The contrast between what's happening inside the building and what's being discussed outside the building couldn't be more stark. On one side, you have players like Corley taking concrete steps to build relationships and prepare for the upcoming season. On the other side, you have endless speculation about alternative quarterbacks, trade scenarios, and every possible way Cleveland could pivot away from Shedeur Sanders. The disconnect is almost comical at this point. The people who actually have to play the games are all in on Shedeur. The people who just talk about the games are still searching for reasons why it might not work. Corley's comments also provide a window into how Shedeur is handling this pre-draft period. Instead of being in the spotlight doing media appearances and collecting attention, he's in Cleveland putting in work. He's building relationships with his future teammates. He's doing the boring, unglamorous stuff that doesn't trend on social media, but absolutely matters when the lights come on in September. That approach tells you a lot about his mindset and his priorities. He's not here for the fame or the circus. He's here to play football and win games. The interview also touched on Corley's own offseason journey, which we'll get into shortly. But the headline, the part that everyone is talking about, is the confirmation that Browns players are already gravitating towards Shedeur Sanders. In a league where quarterback controversies can tear locker rooms apart and derail entire seasons, having this kind of early alignment is invaluable. Cleveland has been through enough dysfunction over the years. The last thing they need is a divided locker room heading into a crucial season. Based on what Corley revealed, that doesn't appear to be a concern. The timing of these comments also matters. We're in the middle of what insiders call smokescreen season, that period before the draft when teams leak false information, float ridiculous trade scenarios, and do everything in their power to keep their true intentions hidden. In the midst of all that noise, Corley's straightforward comments cut through the confusion like a knife. There's no spin here. There's no hidden agenda. Just a professional football player talking about putting in work with his quarterback. Sometimes the simplest statements are the most powerful. For Browns fans who have endured years of quarterback instability, false hope, and organizational dysfunction, this moment represents something genuinely new. It's not a promise from the front office that this time will be different. It's not a coach saying all the right things at a press conference. It's a player, someone who has no obligation to say anything positive, voluntarily expressing his commitment to making the Shedeur Sanders era work. That kind of organic endorsement can't be manufactured or faked. It has to be earned. And apparently, Shedeur has already started earning it. But Corley's viral comments weren't the only noteworthy thing he discussed in that interview. He also revealed some fascinating details about his own offseason development and the specific areas of his game that he's targeting for improvement. While the Shedeur Sanders connection grabbed most of the headlines, What Malachi Corley said about his own off-season development deserves just as much attention. Because if you're trying to understand where the Cleveland Browns are headed as an offensive unit, you need to understand what their young receivers are doing to elevate their games. And Corley is clearly on a mission to become something more than what he was as a rookie. The most significant revelation from his interview was his focus on expanding his release package. For those who aren't steeped in football terminology, the release is the first few steps a receiver takes off the line of scrimmage. It's arguably the most important skill a receiver can develop because it determines whether they can win against press coverage and create the separation needed to get open. A limited release package means a receiver becomes predictable. Defensive backs can study the film, learn the tells, and take away the routes before they even develop. An expanded, diverse release package turns a receiver into a constant problem for defenses because they never know what's coming. Corley was honest about where he currently stands and where he wants to go. He acknowledged that coming out of college and through his rookie season, he's been viewed primarily as a slot receiver. The slot is a valuable position. Don't get it wrong. Some of the most productive receivers in NFL history have made their living working from the slot, using the extra space and cleaner releases to rack up catches and move the chains. But being labeled as a slot-only receiver also comes with limitations. It means defensive coordinators know where to find you. It means your usage becomes predictable. And it means your potential value to the team has a ceiling. Corley wants to blow through that ceiling. His stated goal is to become a player who can line up at the Z receiver position and even play the X if needed. For context, the X receiver is typically the split end who lines up on the line of scrimmage, often against the opponent's best cornerback in press coverage. It's a position that demands exceptional release skills, route running precision, and the ability to win contested catches. The Z receiver lines up off the line of scrimmage and often gets more freedom in his releases, but still needs to be a complete player who can threaten all areas of the field. The fact that Corley is specifically targeting these areas tells you he's thinking about his career with long-term vision. He doesn't want to be a specialist. He doesn't want to be a player who only comes on the field in certain packages. He wants to be a complete receiver who can line up anywhere the coaching staff needs him and win his matchup regardless of the alignment. That kind of versatility is exactly what Cleveland needs as they rebuild their offensive identity around Shedeur Sanders. Corley also touched on the adjustment from college to the NFL, and his insights were refreshingly honest. He talked about the consistency level required at the professional level, something that surprises a lot of young players who dominated in college, but suddenly find themselves struggling to maintain that performance day after day in the NFL. In college, you might face 2 or 3 really good cornerbacks per season. In the NFL, you're facing quality coverage every single week. The margin for error shrinks dramatically, and players who relied on pure athleticism to overcome technical deficiencies quickly find themselves exposed. The body maintenance aspect is another factor Corley mentioned. College players often don't fully appreciate how much wear and tear an NFL season puts on the body. From training camp through the regular season and potentially into the playoffs, the physical demands are relentless. Learning how to take care of your body, how to recover properly, how to manage the aches and pains that accumulate over a 17-game season, all of that is part of the adjustment. Corley acknowledged that this was an area where he had to grow, and the fact that he's talking about it openly suggests he's taken the lessons to heart. Perhaps the most mature comment Corley made was about packing himself during the offseason. He admitted that in previous off-seasons, he had a tendency to go too hard too early. He'd be in peak condition by April, feeling ready for training camp months before it actually started. The problem with that approach is sustainability. If you peak too early, you risk burnout. You risk injuries. You risk arriving at training camp already tired instead of fresh and hungry. Corley has recognized this pattern in himself and is actively working to correct it. That kind of self-awareness is rare in young players. Most guys in their early 20s are still figuring out who they are as professionals. They make mistakes, learn from them, and gradually develop the habits and routines that allow them to sustain success over a long career. The fact that Corley is already identifying these patterns and adjusting his approach suggests a level of maturity that will serve him well as his career progresses. It also suggests that the Cleveland coaching staff has done a good job of educating their young players about what professional development actually looks like. The commitment to the meeting room was another aspect Corley highlighted. He mentioned that this was already a strength of his dating back to high school, but that the NFL demands an even higher level of engagement. Every detail matters at this level. A missed assignment, a misread coverage, a wrong step on a route. Any of these small errors can be the difference between a big play and a turnover. The best receivers in the league are students of the game who spend as much time in the film room as they do on the practice field. Corley appears to understand this and is committed to that aspect of his development. What does all of this mean for Cleveland's offense in the upcoming season? It means that one of their young receivers is actively working to become more valuable. It means that the receiving core, even before any additions through the draft or free agency, is getting better through individual player development. And it means that when Shedeur Sanders drops back to throw, he's going to have a receiver in Malachi Corley who is more versatile, more polished, and more prepared than he was as a rookie. The combination of Corley's commitment to training with Shedeur and his focus on expanding his own skill set paints a picture of a player who is serious about contributing to something special in Cleveland. These aren't the actions of someone who is just collecting a paycheck and going through the motions. These are the actions of a young professional who sees an opportunity and is determined to maximize it. For the Cleveland Browns, having players with this mentality is essential. The organization has been through so much turmoil over the years that the culture has often felt broken beyond repair. But culture isn't built through press releases or motivational speeches. It's built through the daily actions of the people in the building. When a young receiver voluntarily schedules off-season throwing sessions with his quarterback and spends his free time working on the weakest parts of his game, that's culture being built in real time. Corley's interview provided a glimpse into what's happening behind the scenes in Cleveland, and the picture is more encouraging than the external noise would suggest. While the sports talk shows debate whether the Browns should pursue every possible alternative to Shedeur Sanders, the players are putting in work. While the rumor mill churns out increasingly ridiculous trade scenarios, the receivers are building chemistry with their new quarterback. The contrast couldn't be clearer. And speaking of those rumors, the biggest one of all just got absolutely demolished by insiders who finally told the truth about what was really happening. For weeks, it felt like you couldn't go a single day without seeing another headline about Malik Willis and the Cleveland Browns. The rumors were everywhere. The speculation was constant. And for a certain segment of fans and analysts, the Willis possibility represented hope that Cleveland would pivot away from Shedeur Sanders and go in a completely different direction. But here's what just came out that changes everything. The Malik Willis to Cleveland conversation was never real. It was smoke and mirrors from the very beginning, and the people pushing it the hardest were either willfully ignoring the obvious red flags or had their own agenda for wanting Cleveland to look anywhere but at Shedeur. Let's break down what actually happened and why this was always destined to fall apart under any kind of scrutiny. The most damning piece of information that emerged from recent analyst discussions involves something that most people weren't even considering: the agent situation. Malik Willis and Deshaun Watson share the same agent. That single fact, once you really think about it, explains almost everything about why this deal was never going to happen. Think about it from the agent's perspective. Their job is to represent the best interests of their clients, all of their clients. Deshaun Watson is currently on the Cleveland Browns roster with a fully guaranteed contract that has made him one of the highest paid players in NFL history. His career has been derailed by injuries and off-field issues, and right now, the Browns and Watson's camp are trying to rehabilitate his image and give him a chance to show that he can still contribute to an NFL team. Whether that means starting, backing up, or simply getting some preseason reps to remind teams what he can do when healthy, the goal is clear. Position Watson for whatever comes next, whether that's with Cleveland or elsewhere. Now imagine that same agent bringing Malik Willis into that situation. Willis would immediately become competition for Watson. Even if Willis came in as a backup, his presence would create a dynamic where one client is potentially taking opportunities away from another. Every snap Willis takes in a preseason game is a snap Watson doesn't get to show what he can do. Every conversation about Willis potentially taking over as the starter is a conversation that further diminishes Watson's value and standing. Why would any agent willingly create that conflict between two of their own clients? This is the angle that most people completely missed while they were busy crafting elaborate scenarios about how Willis could come to Cleveland and save the day. The business realities of the situation made it nearly impossible from the start. An agent's reputation depends on their ability to look out for every client on their roster. Putting Willis in a position where his success directly undermines Watson's chances at career rehabilitation would be a betrayal of the professional relationship between agent and client. It simply wasn't going to happen. The analysts who broke this down on the UCSS show deserved credit for statting what should have been obvious all along. One of them put it perfectly when he said that Willis's agent has done a masterful job keeping his client's name in the headlines despite the fact that Willis only played 6 games last season. Think about that for a moment. 6 games. That's barely a third of a season. And yet Willis has been discussed as if he's a proven commodity worth building around. The media attention has been wildly disproportionate to the actual on-field production. And that's a testament to how effectively his representation has managed the narrative. The $30 million number that kept getting floated around was another red flag that many people ignored. The suggestion that Cleveland would pay Willis $30 million for 1 year as a backup or potential bridge quarterback was always absurd. This is the same organization that famously refused to give Baker Mayfield $30 million per year, and Mayfield had actually accomplished things in Cleveland. He led the team to a playoff win. He broke franchise records. He was the first overall pick who had proven he could play at a high level in this league, and the Browns let him walk rather than pay that price. Now we're supposed to believe they'd give that same money, or more, to a quarterback who has started 6 career games and whose best quality is his arm strength and athleticism. The numbers never made sense. The logic never held up. But the rumors persisted anyway because there's a segment of the football world that was desperate for any alternative to Shedeur Sanders. Let's call it what it is, the anybody but Shedeur crowd. These are the people who, for whatever reason, have decided that Shedeur Sanders cannot possibly be the answer for the Cleveland Browns. Maybe they don't like his confidence. Maybe they have concerns about his college competition. Maybe they just don't want to see him succeed. Whatever the motivation, this group has been pushing every possible alternative since the moment it became clear that Cleveland was seriously considering drafting him with the 6th overall pick. Malik Willis was just the latest name they latched onto. Before Willis, it was other quarterbacks. After Willis, it will be someone else. The pattern is predictable because the motivation never changes. They don't actually care about finding the best solution for Cleveland. They care about finding any solution that isn't Shedeur Sanders. But the football insiders who actually understand how these deals work have consistently pushed back against the Willis narrative. On the UCSS show, multiple analysts expressed their belief that the deal was never realistic. One of them pointed out that he's been saying for weeks that he doesn't think Willis is coming to Cleveland. The financial implications, the agent conflict, the lack of logic behind the move, all of it pointed in the same direction. This was a smokescreen, not a genuine pursuit. And that's exactly what this time of year is. Smokescreen season. The weeks leading up to the NFL draft are filled with intentional misdirection, leaked information that may or may not be accurate, and endless speculation designed to keep everyone guessing. Teams don't want their actual plans to be known. They want other organizations to be confused about what they're going to do on draft night. So they float names. They send scouts to visit players they have no intention of selecting. They leak interest in trades that will never happen. The Malik Willis rumors fit perfectly into this pattern. Whether Cleveland's front office was actively floating his name to create confusion, or whether media members were simply running with a story that generated clicks, the result was the same. Weeks of coverage devoted to a scenario that was never actually on the table. The fallout from this revelation should be significant. Every analyst who breathlessly reported on the Willis to Cleveland possibility, without acknowledging the obvious complications, should be held accountable. Every take artist who insisted that Cleveland was seriously considering this move should be reminded of their track record. And every fan who bought into the narrative should understand that the media ecosystem around the NFL is designed to generate attention, not necessarily to provide accurate information. The truth is much simpler than the rumors suggested. Cleveland has a plan. That plan involves Shedeur Sanders. The front office has been building around that reality for months now, regardless of what names get floated in the press. The offensive line overhaul is happening because they need to protect their new quarterback. The receiver upgrades are being considered because they need to give their new quarterback weapons. Every move the organization makes points in the same direction, and it's not toward Malik Willis. Does this mean there's zero chance of Cleveland making an unexpected move at quarterback? Of course not. Anything can happen in the NFL, and front offices change their minds all the time. But based on the evidence available, based on the logical analysis of the situation, and based on what insiders are actually reporting behind the scenes, the Willis conversation was never what it appeared to be. The anybody but Shedeur crowd will move on to the next name. They'll find another alternative to push, another rumor to spread, another scenario to construct. That's what they do. But for those paying attention to the substance rather than the noise, the picture in Cleveland is becoming clearer by the day. Shedeur Sanders is the future. The players are already buying in, and the distractions are slowly being exposed for what they always were. But if you think the Willis situation was strange, wait until you hear what else the Cleveland Browns have been up to behind the scenes. Just when you thought the Cleveland Browns couldn't generate any more headlines, a report surfaced that left analysts genuinely stunned. The organization has apparently petitioned the National Football League to change the rules regarding how far into the future teams can trade draft picks. Currently, NFL teams are limited to trading picks 3 years out. Cleveland wants to extend that window to 5 years. And the reaction from people who actually understand the implications has been almost universally negative. Let's start with why this rule exists in the first place, because understanding the context is essential to grasping why Cleveland's request is so problematic. The 3-year limitation on draft pick trades isn't arbitrary. It was implemented specifically to prevent teams from mortgaging their futures to an irresponsible degree. Draft picks are the lifeblood of roster construction in the NFL. They allow organizations to add young, cost-controlled talent that can be developed over time. They provide flexibility in negotiations with other teams. They represent hope and potential, especially for franchises that are struggling in the present. When teams start trading away future picks, they're essentially borrowing from tomorrow to pay for today. The danger of this approach becomes obvious when you extend the timeline. A team that trades away 3 years of future picks is already in a precarious position. They've committed to winning now at the expense of their ability to replenish the roster down the line. But at least with a 3-year window, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Eventually, those picks come back, and the organization can begin rebuilding through the draft again. Now imagine extending that window to 5 years. Suddenly, teams can bury themselves in holes that take the better part of a decade to climb out of. A general manager can make a series of aggressive trades, collect players who help him win in the short term, and then leave for another job before the consequences fully materialize. The next regime inherits a roster with no draft capital and no easy path to improvement. The franchise spirals, fans suffer, and the cycle of dysfunction continues. This is exactly what the 3-year rule was designed to prevent. And the fact that Cleveland is petitioning to change, it tells you everything you need to know about where this organization currently stands. One analyst compared the Browns' request to asking a bank for a 50-year mortgage because you can't afford the payments on a 30-year loan. It's a perfect analogy. There's a reason banks don't write 50-year mortgages. The risk is too high, the timeline is too long, and the likelihood of something going wrong increases exponentially with each additional year. The NFL's 3-year rule serves the same purpose. It's a guardrail that prevents teams from making catastrophically bad decisions that haunt them for a decade or more. The irony of Cleveland making this request is almost too perfect. The Browns are a franchise that has repeatedly made exactly the kind of short-sighted, win-now moves that the 3-year rule is meant to discourage. The Deshaun Watson trade is the most obvious example. Cleveland gave up multiple first-round picks and handed out a fully guaranteed contract worth over $200 million for a quarterback who has been unable to stay healthy and whose off-field issues have created constant distractions. That trade has already hamstrung the organization's ability to build through the draft, and the effects will be felt for years to come. Now, having already dug themselves into a hole with aggressive trading, Cleveland is asking the league to let them dig even deeper. The lack of self-awareness is staggering. It's like a gambler who has lost everything at the blackjack table asking the casino to extend their credit line. At some point, someone needs to step in and say no. The question of whether the league will approve this petition is genuinely uncertain. Decisions like this typically go before the owners for a vote, and predicting what owners will do is always tricky. Some owners might look at Cleveland's request and immediately see the danger. They'll recognize that allowing teams to trade picks 5 years out creates risks that affect the entire league, not just the team making the trades. A dysfunctional franchise that has buried itself under bad decisions is bad for business. It creates non-competitive games, hurts television ratings in that market, and diminishes the overall product. But other owners might have a different calculation. If only 1 or 2 teams are irresponsible enough to actually trade picks 5 years out, then the rest of the league benefits. They can continue to extract value from organizations that are willing to mortgage their futures for short-term gains. Every bad trade creates a winner on the other side, and the teams that maintain discipline would have even more opportunities to accumulate assets at the expense of their reckless competitors. This cynical view might actually carry the day. Owners are businessmen first, and if they see an opportunity to benefit from another team's poor decision-making, they might be willing to allow it. The competitive balance of the league might suffer in the long run, but individual franchises could profit in the short term. The timing of this petition is also worth examining. Cleveland is in a position where they've already spent significant draft capital and are looking at ways to acquire more talent to surround their new quarterback. If they could trade picks further into the future, they'd have more ammunition for trades, more flexibility in negotiations, and more options for filling roster holes. From a purely selfish perspective, the request makes sense, but from a league-wide perspective, it sets a dangerous precedent. One analyst made an excellent point about the average tenure of general managers in the NFL. Most GMs last about 3 years before they're either fired or moved to another organization. That means the person trading away picks 5 years from now probably won't be around to face the consequences of that decision. They'll make the trade, enjoy the short-term benefits, and then leave the mess for someone else to clean up. the organizational dysfunction gets passed down like a bad inheritance, and the cycle never ends. The comparison to the NBA's rules is also relevant. Basketball allows teams to trade picks further into the future, but there are protections in place. You must have a pick in every other year, which prevents complete depletion of draft assets. Additionally, the draft itself is less impactful in basketball than in football. A single late-round pick in the NFL can become a franchise cornerstone. The same isn't necessarily true in the NBA, where star talent is concentrated at the very top of the draft. The sports are different enough that the rules shouldn't necessarily be identical. For Cleveland fans, this petition represents another chapter in a story that has become all too familiar. An organization that consistently makes aggressive, short-sighted moves that feel good in the moment but create problems down the line. The Watson trade was supposed to deliver a Super Bowl. Instead, it's delivered injuries, controversy, and a depleted roster. Now, rather than accepting the consequences of their decisions and building patiently toward the future, the front office is asking for rule changes that would allow them to continue the same approach. The lack of accountability is frustrating to watch. The inability to learn from past mistakes is even more concerning, and the willingness to ask for special treatment rather than accepting the limitations that every other team operates under is emblematic of an organizational culture that still hasn't figured out how to build sustainable success. Whether the league approves this petition remains to be seen, but regardless of the outcome, the mere fact that Cleveland is making this request tells you everything you need to know about where the decision-makers' heads are at. They're still chasing quick fixes. They're still looking for shortcuts, and they're still refusing to acknowledge that the path they've been on has led them to exactly where they are now. Fortunately for Browns fans, the future isn't entirely dependent on the front office's ability to make sound long-term decisions. Because on the field, where it actually matters, the momentum is shifting in a different direction. Something shifted in the conversation around Cleveland over the past few weeks, and it's becoming increasingly difficult for the doubters to ignore. Every alternative to Shedeur Sanders that has been floated, every trade scenario, every backup plan, every suggestion that Cleveland should pivot in a different direction, all of it has collapsed under the weight of basic logic and scrutiny. The anybody but Shedeur movement is dying, and the evidence is becoming impossible to deny. Start with the Malik Willis situation that we already covered. That rumor dominated headlines for weeks, but once people actually examined the details, it fell apart immediately. The agent conflict, the financial absurdity, the lack of any logical foundation for the move. It was never real. And the people pushing it the hardest are now quietly moving on to the next distraction. But Willis wasn't the only name that got thrown around. Kyler Murray was mentioned as a potential trade target, with conflicting reports about whether the Arizona Cardinals were actually open to moving him. Anthony Richardson's name surfaced as a possibility if Indianapolis decided to move on. Every week seemed to bring a new quarterback who could theoretically end up in Cleveland if the organization just wanted to explore alternatives. And every week, those alternatives proved to be either unrealistic, undesirable, or both. The pattern became predictable. Someone would float a name. The sports talk shows would spend a few days debating whether Cleveland should pursue that player. Fans would get worked up arguing about the pros and cons. And then the story would quietly fade away when people realized that the move made no sense. Then the cycle would start again with a new name. Meanwhile, the actual indicators coming out of Cleveland pointed consistently in the same direction. Todd Monken's comments at the Combine about Shedeur's mobility and arm talent. The offensive line additions designed to protect whoever is playing quarterback. The receiver evaluations suggesting the organization wants to surround their new signal caller with weapons. Every tangible action the front office has taken supports the conclusion that Shedeur Sanders is the plan. The disconnect between the external noise and the internal reality has become almost comical. Outside the building, you have analysts debating whether Cleveland should trade for a backup quarterback from another team or sign a free agent who couldn't hold a starting job elsewhere. Inside the building, you have coaches expressing genuine excitement about coaching Shedeur and players scheduling voluntary off-season workouts to build chemistry with him. Which source of information seems more reliable? The anybody but Shedeur crowd has always been driven more by emotion than logic. Some of them don't like his confidence, viewing it as arrogance rather than self-assurance. Some of them have concerns about the level of competition he faced in college, ignoring the fact that he still had to perform at a high level regardless of who was across from him. Some of them simply don't want to see a Sanders succeed at the NFL level, whether out of jealousy, bias, or some other motivation that has nothing to do with football evaluation. But emotions don't change reality, and the reality is that Cleveland has made their decision. They're building around Shedeur Sanders. The roster moves support it. The coaching staff's comments support it. The player buy-in supports it. At this point, the only people still questioning the direction are the ones who weren't paying attention in the first place or who have a vested interest in stirring up controversy. The smokescreen season argument cuts both ways. Yes, teams intentionally float false information to confuse their competitors, but Cleveland isn't the only team capable of reading through the noise. Other franchises see the same evidence. They understand that the Willis rumors were never serious. They recognize that the various trade scenarios were media inventions rather than genuine possibilities. The league knows what Cleveland is doing, even if the general public is still catching up. What's particularly satisfying about watching the alternatives fall apart is that it validates the initial read on the situation. From the beginning, it was clear that Shedeur Sanders represented the best path forward for Cleveland. He's a talented quarterback with the arm, the poise, and the mentality to succeed at the NFL level. He's handled the pre-draft process with maturity and professionalism. He's already building relationships with his future teammates. Everything about how he's conducting himself suggests a player who is ready to be a franchise quarterback. The critics will continue to search for reasons to doubt. That's what critics do, but they're running out of ammunition. The Malik Willis safety net is gone. The various trade scenarios have been exposed as fantasy. The backup plans don't exist. At some point, even the most stubborn doubters will have to accept that Shedeur Sanders is the Cleveland Browns quarterback, and the only question that matters is how well he performs once the games start. For the fans who believed in Shedeur from the beginning, this moment feels like vindication. After months of arguing with people who insisted that Cleveland should look elsewhere, the conversation is finally shifting. The narratives are aligning with the reality. The noise is fading, and the signal is getting stronger. And perhaps the strongest signal of all is what's happening with the players who actually have to share a locker room with their new quarterback. Let's zoom out and consider the bigger picture of what Malachi Corley's comments represent. Because this isn't just about one receiver and one quarterback scheduling some throwing sessions. This is about culture. This is about buy-in. This is about the foundation being laid for something that could genuinely change the trajectory of the Cleveland Browns franchise. In professional football, the relationship between a quarterback and his receiving core is sacred. It's built on trust, timing, and countless hours of shared work. When a quarterback drops back and scans the field, he needs to know exactly where his receivers are going to be. He needs to trust that the routes will be run precisely, that the breaks will happen on time, that the ball will be caught when it arrives. That trust doesn't develop automatically. It has to be earned through repetition and commitment. What Corley announced, that he's voluntarily traveling to Cleveland to work with Shedeur during the offseason, is a tangible expression of that commitment. He's not being forced to do this. There's no contractual obligation. The team isn't mandating these sessions. This is a professional football player looking at his situation and deciding that putting in extra work with his quarterback is the best use of his time. That decision sends ripples throughout the organization. Other receivers see Corley making this commitment and ask themselves whether they should be doing the same. The coaching staff sees the initiative and gains confidence that the players are taking ownership of their preparation. The front office sees the buy-in and feels validated in their decision to build around Shedeur. One player's choice to schedule some throwing sessions becomes a statement that reverberates far beyond those individual workouts. The contrast with what typically happens during quarterback controversies is stark. When locker rooms are divided about who should be playing quarterback, you see players picking sides. You see passive-aggressive comments in press conferences. You see a lack of commitment to building chemistry with any one quarterback because nobody knows who's going to be starting when the season begins. The uncertainty creates paralysis, and the team suffers as a result. Cleveland doesn't appear to be dealing with any of that. Based on Corley's comments and the overall tenor of reports coming out of the organization, the players have accepted that Shedeur Sanders is their quarterback. They're not waiting to see what happens with trade rumors. They're not hedging their bets by refusing to commit. They're diving in head first and putting in the work to make this partnership successful. This kind of buy-in is rare, especially for a quarterback who hasn't taken a single regular season snap in the NFL yet. Usually, veteran players adopt a wait-and-see attitude toward rookie quarterbacks. They've seen, too, many highly touted prospects flame out to invest emotionally before the games actually start. The fact that Corley is already committing his off-season time to building a connection with Shedeur suggests that something about this situation feels different to the players who are living it. Part of it might be Shedeur's personality and approach. By all accounts, he's handled the pre-draft process with professionalism and maturity. He's not out there seeking attention or making headlines for the wrong reasons. He's training. He's preparing. He's doing the work that successful NFL quarterbacks do. When players see that kind of commitment from their quarterback, it inspires reciprocal commitment from them. Part of it might also be the organization's messaging. Cleveland's coaches have been vocal about their belief in Shedeur. Todd Monken's comments at the Combine were detailed and enthusiastic, not the generic compliments that coaches typically offer when they're trying to avoid committing to anything. When the coaching staff expresses genuine excitement about a player, it gives the rest of the roster permission to share that excitement. Whatever the specific factors driving it, the result is clear. Cleveland's locker room is aligning behind Shedeur Sanders before the draft has even happened. That's remarkable when you consider how much noise and speculation has surrounded this situation. Despite weeks of rumors about alternative quarterbacks, despite constant questioning from media members and analysts, despite every possible reason to be uncertain about the future, the players are choosing to move forward together. Corley's comments also hint at a broader shift in how young players approach their careers. The old model of waiting to be developed by coaches is being replaced by a more proactive approach where players take ownership of their own growth. Corley isn't sitting around hoping that the coaching staff will turn him into an ex-receiver. He's actively working on the release package and skills he needs to play that position. He's not waiting for chemistry with Shedeur to develop organically during training camp. He's forcing the issue by scheduling off-season workouts. This proactive mentality is essential for building winning cultures. Teams that wait for things to happen rarely achieve sustained success. Teams filled with players who make things happen, who take initiative, who refuse to accept limitations, those are the teams that compete for championships. Corley's approach suggests that at least some portion of Cleveland's roster has embraced that mentality. The practical benefits of these off-season workouts will become apparent when the season starts. Timing routes, which depend on precise coordination between quarterback and receiver, will be sharper because Corley and Shedeur have already put in the work together. The communication shortcuts that develop between players who have spent time together will already be in place. The trust that allows a quarterback to throw into tight windows, confident that his receiver will be there, will have been built during those Cleveland sessions. These advantages might seem small in isolation, but they compound over the course of a season. A fraction of a second of improved timing can be the difference between a completion and an interception. A deeper level of trust can allow a quarterback to make throws that he wouldn't attempt otherwise. The extra work that Corley and Shedeur are putting in now will pay dividends in ways that might be difficult to quantify, but will absolutely show up in the win-loss column. For Cleveland fans who have been through so much disappointment, this emerging story provides genuine reason for optimism. Not because of promises from the front office or projections from draft analysts, but because of what the players themselves are doing. When the people who actually have to perform on Sundays are voluntarily committing their off-season time to making the new quarterback successful, that means something. It means the culture is changing. It means the commitment is real. It means that maybe, just maybe, this time will be different. The road ahead is still long, and there are no guarantees in professional football. But the foundation being laid right now in Cleveland feels more solid than anything the franchise has built in years. As we pull all of these threads together, the picture of Cleveland's offseason comes into focus. It's a picture of an organization at a crossroads, making decisions that will define the franchise for years to come. Some of those decisions have been controversial. Some have been confusing. But through all of it, a clear direction is emerging, and the upcoming weeks will determine whether that direction leads to success or more heartbreak. Free agency officially opens on March 11th, and that date marks the beginning of the most critical period in Cleveland's roster construction. The offensive line situation remains the top priority. With 4 veteran starters hitting the open market, the Browns simply cannot enter the season with the same personnel they had last year. The protection has to improve. The run blocking has to get better. Without a functional offensive line, nothing else matters. Reports suggest that Cleveland has already begun addressing this need. A new tackle has been brought in, and more additions are expected. The question is whether the organization can successfully replace the experience and cohesion that walks out the door when Jack Conklin, Jedrick Wills Jr., Wyatt Teller, and Ethan Posick become free agents. Rebuilding an entire offensive line unit is no small task, and the margin for error is slim. The receiver room is another area that demands attention. Malachi Corley's development is encouraging, but one improving young receiver isn't enough to field a championship-caliber passing attack. Names like Carnell Tate and Jordan Tyson have been mentioned as potential draft targets. Trade scenarios have been discussed. The organization clearly understands that surrounding Shedeur Sanders with weapons is essential to his success, and by extension, their success. The draft itself looms as the biggest event on the calendar. Cleveland holds significant capital, including that 6th overall pick that has generated so much speculation. How they use that pick will tell us a lot about their true priorities. Do they go offensive line and address the most glaring need? Do they take a receiver and trust that the line can be fixed through free agency? Do they trade down, accumulate more assets, and try to fill multiple holes with later selections? Every option carries risks and rewards, and the decision makers will be judged harshly if they get it wrong. Quarterback situation, despite all the noise, appears settled. Shedeur Sanders is the pick. The coaching staff wants him. The players are buying in. The front office is building around him. Barring something completely unforeseen, he will be the Cleveland Browns starting quarterback when the season begins. That reality should end the endless speculation about alternatives, though it probably won't. The anybody but Shedeur crowd will find new angles to pursue, new reasons to doubt, new scenarios to construct. That's just how sports media works. But for those focused on substance rather than noise, the questions are different. How quickly can Shedeur adjust to the speed of the NFL? How will he handle the pressure of being a franchise quarterback in a city desperate for success? Can he develop the chemistry with his receivers that turns a collection of talented individuals into a cohesive offense? These are the questions that will be answered on the field, not in press conferences or podcast interviews. The Malik Willis situation has been put to rest, at least for now. The agent conflicts, the financial absurdity, and the lack of logical foundation for the move have all been exposed. But smokescreen season isn't over yet, and new names will inevitably surface in the weeks leading up to the draft. The challenge for fans and analysts alike is to separate the genuine information from the intentional misdirection. It's not easy, but it's necessary for understanding what's actually happening. The controversial petition to trade draft picks 5 years out hangs over the organization like a cloud. Whether the league approves it or not, the mere fact that Cleveland is making this request raises concerns about the decision-making culture within the franchise. Are they learning from past mistakes, or are they doubling down on the same aggressive approach that has created problems in the past? The answer to that question will shape the organization's future for years to come. Despite all the concerns and controversies, there are genuine reasons for optimism in Cleveland. The Corley connection represents exactly the kind of player-driven culture building that successful franchises exhibit. The coaching staff's enthusiasm for Shedeur suggests a genuine alignment between the people calling the plays and the player who has to execute them. The draft capital gives the organization flexibility to address multiple needs. The pieces are there for something special to emerge. Whether that potential translates into on-field success remains to be seen. Cleveland fans have been burned too many times to embrace unconditional optimism. They've seen promising situations fall apart. They've watched talented players fail to develop. They've experienced the heartbreak of expectations unmet and hopes dashed. That skepticism is earned, and it won't disappear just because the off-season reports are encouraging. But there's also something different about this moment. The buy-in from players like Corley feels genuine, not manufactured. The coaching staff's comments about Shedeur are specific and detailed, not generic praise designed to deflect questions. The organizational focus on building around the new quarterback suggests a coherent strategy rather than the chaotic decision-making that has plagued the franchise in the past. The next few weeks will bring more news, more rumors, and more opportunities for the narrative to shift. Free agency will add or subtract pieces from the roster. The draft will answer some questions while raising new ones. Training camp will provide the first real look at how this team functions with its new quarterback under center. And eventually, the games will start, and all of the speculation will give way to reality. For now, Cleveland sits at the precipice of something that could be genuinely transformative. The foundation is being laid. The culture is being built. The commitment is being demonstrated. What happens next depends on execution, on health, on the countless variables that determine success in professional football. But for the first time in a long time, there's reason to believe that the Cleveland Browns might actually be heading in the right direction. The noise is dying down. The signal is getting stronger. And the players, the people who matter most, are already acting like they believe something special is coming. The only thing left to do is prove it on the field.